Within the Veil by Brandy, Vallance. Chapter 22. Feya woke with a start. Her ribs ached, and when she took a breath, her lungs burned like a coal was set against them. Cold rock was at her back. A rock arch loomed above. She moved to sit. "Stay there." Alasdair walked across the cave and knelt beside her. His hair was wet and curled around his ears. His shirt was ripped at the collar and gaped open, revealing his chest. "How do you feel?" Feya lay back down and widened her eyes at the sight of him. Nothing about him spoke of the English palace guard. If anything, he resembled a Highlander, all wildness and hair askew. Water drops from his hair slid down his neck and pooled at his collarbone. Feya stared at the liquid, the way the firelight made it shimmer on his exposed skin. Where are we running?" "That's right." He hesitated. "What else do you remember?" "The gypsies." The room shrank, and the fire seemed too hot. Her lungs ached with a vengeance. She coughed, but that only made it worse. Alasdair laid his hand on hers. "We escaped them." "We did?" He nodded and raised his dark eyebrows, concern lacing his expression. His hand was still cold from the rain, but something more rested in the weight of his touch. Comfort, safety. The feelings moved along her arm like fine cloth. A shiver dove between her shoulder blades and trailed down her back. "Are you cold?" "I don't think so." Feya avoided his eyes and glanced over his shoulder to the fire. They were in a cave, and it looked like they were hidden deep within. She could see no opening or entrance, only the rough arched ceiling and the orange shadows stretching over the walls. "My chest hurts." She placed her hand on her breastbone, as if the outward pressure would relieve it. It didn't. "Did I have an attack of the vapours? I've heard some women talk about that." Alasdair smiled, but then covered it by drawing his lips into a thin line. Seriousness passed over his face. "A spell of the nerves would have been preferable to what you experienced. You stopped breathing." "Stopped?" "I'm afraid so." He placed his other hand upon her shoulder. Feya knew his gaze was set upon her, searching her face. She only had to lift her eyes, and she'd be looking into the most astonishing blue. She thought of the night at Holyrood Palace, when she'd first locked eyes with him, and how that had tilted everything within her. That was nothing compared to this. Her cheeks flared with heat. "Did I die?" The weight in his touch increased. He paused for a moment too long. "Not that I could tell." "Well," Feya shifted her eyes to the dirt smeared across his shirt and the ripped piece of his collar. She swallowed, her mouth dry. She should say something to break his touch. "I thought it was impossible to live after one stopped breathing. Did ye do something to me?" Alasdair cleared his throat and pulled back, brushing his fingers along her arm like an afterthought. "It wasn't your time to go." He turned, picked up 2 long sticks and moved to the fire. The orange glow washed over him like a blanket spread over his shoulders. He picked up a stone from deep within the fire, using the sticks like prongs. "What's that for?" The corner of his lip tipped up. "You'll see." He carried the rock a few metres across the cave and lowered it into a small pool of water. Steam rolled up, and the water bubbled. He reached for a pile of pine needles and tree bark and threw them in. After a few minutes, he dipped a curved piece of tree bark into the pool. "I regret it's not strong and black, but it's the best I can do at present." "You made tea?" Never in all her wildest days would she have imagined that he would be able to do such a thing, especially in the wild. The pine needles have some sustenance, and I reckon the hot liquid will do you some good. Thank you. Feya took the makeshift cup and sipped. It was strong and bitter, but the heat and the steam were like instant medicine. As the liquid went down, it felt as if her chest loosened a bit. It's a wonder the gypsies didn't catch us. She took another sip. How did you manage it? Where was I? She laughed, nerves running through her. Passed out on the ground? Quite. He watched her over the lip of his own improvised cup. For how long? He looked into the fire, and his expression turned deathly serious. Long enough to scare me. Feya gripped her cup tighter. To be scared, he would have to care about her, and that seemed impossible. I don't think anything scares you. Really? He sat casually, leaning one elbow on his raised knee. Who do you think I am? Some kind of Prometheus? I don't know who that is. She laughed out of shame. Their differences in education were apparent. Alasdair sipped his tea and winked. Never mind.